The Louisiana Association of Public Charter Schools. We are a statewide organization that promotes and advocates on behalf of charter schools. There's approximately 105 charter schools, and we're serving about 45,000 students statewide.
What is the role that the public charter schools play in education in Louisiana?
Charter school law was first passed in the state in 1995, and the law specifically talks about charter schools are there to innovate. So the idea is that not all children learn the same way, and that if we open schools such as charter schools and give them the freedom and flexibility to create curriculums, to establish their budgets, to do their hiring processes, and to create programs tailored very specifically to meet the needs of their community, that we can see greater academic gains, happier communities around public education, those sorts of things.
And what kind of response and results have you seen from the charter schools throughout the state?
We've actually had really good results. Nationally, it's been a mixed bag for charter schools, but studies have shown here in Louisiana, due to what we believe have been pretty rigorous standards that are required before you can open a charter school, that we're seeing our schools frankly outperform many of their traditional public school peers.
Common Core is a set of standards that have been adopted rapidly by 46 states. So the standards have outlined what students should know, understand, and be able to do in grades K through 12. These standards are unique because the standards are backward mapped from what students should be able to do by the time they're out of high school, and we backward map it to make students college and career ready, versus the way our previous standards were written from our state standards, which started off on the kindergarten level, then moved up to first, second, and third grade. The Common Core is also unique and specific in that it has literacy standards across content areas, which is very important. It's a shift for a lot of our teachers. They also have a focus on informational text, which again are a lot of things that teachers now have to learn how to adjust their instruction in order to meet some of the demands of the Common Core standards. From the math end, teachers will have to focus more on our mathematical practices. Again, that's something that's unique and specific to Common Core that previous standards had but didn't have in such a coherent, robust way. We do have a debt to the standards movement. We know that standards aren't anything new. They've been around for at least 2 or 3 decades now. Systematic approach on what students should know. It's an agreement on what students should learn. And really, when the standards movement came into place even prior to Common Core, it allowed professional organizations such as ASCD to begin to argue that teachers were in fact best equipped to say what students should know and do. And states begin to align their policy and their reforms to meet the standards. So the standards movement, in fact, led to a lot of transparency and a lot of equity in education. However, we know that there were drawbacks as well. Too many standards. There was a report released around the standards in Hawaii. Did you all read this report that if you were to teach 5th grade standards in the state of Hawaii, it would take you 13 years to teach the standards, right? It's like a checklist. That engine's moving and everyone's racing and no one's really, nothing's sticking to the students. So that was one big challenge, and most states kind of had similar issues. Too little curriculum, and I think this is where we are now with Common Core, because oftentimes people think that standards mean curriculum, and it doesn't. And a textbook isn't a curriculum either, but a curriculum is in fact something that allows us to make sense and meaning of ideas and concepts. So when I say that third bullet, oftentimes folks will say, well, that's a good thing. Textbooks shouldn't tell teachers what they should do. And that's true, but without textbooks and with little standards, then teachers are essentially left with a vacuum of curriculum support, and they don't really know what to do. How many of you have textbooks that have Common Core aligned stamped on them? Right. I was very surprised because I have last year my daughter was in the 8th grade and she was taking algebra, and her algebra textbook had Common Core aligned to it, and I was shocked because I thought there's no way the textbook could be Common Core aligned. So I think it's a good idea. If you haven't looked at the publisher criteria, I'll show you where those websites are. Before you go out and make any major purchasing decisions, you want to really look at the publisher's criteria to determine if the items or the books that you're purchasing are actually aligned to Common Core. And if they are, please email me because I haven't found any that are. So the standards are actually in effect now. I think the question is, when will schools begin to take the common assessments? So states could select from 2 assessment consortia, either Smarter Balance or PARC, and those tests actually begin in 2014-2015 school year. So lots of schools and states are now very much, feeling the sense of urgency to begin to implement Common Core in their schools, because they will take a test, which, by the way, is 100% online. So that in and of itself brings another set of challenges that school districts will need to be aware of.
What are the advantages to the Common Core?
I think the advantages of the Common Core are numerous, and I guess we could say that they still remain to be seen because we're just in the early stages of implementation. But from what I've seen, the standards really are based on best instructional practices, and so the standards are rooted in pedagogy that we've known for years and years works for students. And so I think there's that piece, and also the fact that the standards are transparent and across 46 states. I also think it allows for a greater level of teaching and learning throughout all of the states, rather than different states focusing on different standards and not really having the opportunity to compare apples to apples, because everyone's working with their different standards and their different assessments. The Common Core essentially brings all of those pieces together. So.
Are you encouraged by the potential that this offers?
I'm absolutely encouraged by the potential it offers. Even now in my work, I've seen a level of discourse about teaching and learning that I haven't seen in the past. So it is very exciting. I'm a mother myself, and I'm thrilled that my daughter is going to be learning under these new set of standards, because I do find them to be more robust, more rigorous, and they demand a higher level of teaching and learning from our teachers and from our students.
My name is Steve Kaur. I am an instructor and a consultant for the International Institute for Restorative Practices. We're a graduate school located in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, and part of what we do from the graduate school is provide professional development around restorative practices to a number of organizations, or types of organizations, but our primary work has been in education. So I get the opportunity to travel around and work with educators across the country, and sometimes out of the country, which is always fun, to talk about these principles. And I know we have a couple other folks. I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves in a few moments here. But what we want to try to accomplish, in the few moments that we have here, is to do a brief introduction and share some of our key points, and then really allow quite a bit of time for Q&A. Okay, so we're talking about alternatives to exclusionary discipline, and it's not the type of topic where you can just come in and say, so here's what you do, here's A, B, C, D, boom, make it happen. Okay, we've got to allow for people to say, hey, here's my reality, here's my context, here's what I can and can't do, and here are my boundaries and my strengths and all of that. So we really want to try to allow a lot of time for those questions to happen. So I'm going to push through really quickly with a couple of points, a couple of slides, and then we're going to turn it over, and then we're going to have time for question. So why the change? Clearly, traditionally, this exclusionary discipline, catch the culprit, punish them, push them aside, has been, what we've done in related to discipline for years and years and years. To be really direct, and some of the statements I'm about ready to make, for the sake of brevity, might be a bit broad, but we'll deal with that as we go. Exclusionary discipline just does not achieve the desired outcomes. That's just all there is to it. The desired outcomes being creating a positive environment for teaching and learning to occur. Okay, exclusionary discipline is just not leading to those outcomes. In fact, just the opposite. So then the question becomes, well, then why do we continue to do it? Okay, ever hear the definition of insanity, doing the same thing but expecting a different result? Well, boy, have we been entrenched in that when it comes to these type of disciplinary procedures. Well, I would submit that exclusionary discipline continues because of a deeply held kind of value in individual guilt. So I'm trying to do something, I'm trying to achieve something. If there is somebody or something that is happening that is creating difficulty for me, find that son of a gun and get him the heck out of my classroom, all right? Because that's the problem. And then once that's done, then I can just go on and everything else is going to be okay. And that kind of deeply held paradigm also lends itself to this anger and to this revenge. Okay? I mean, can you actually say it's your fault, get out, with a smile on your face? If you can, I'm a little worried. All right, it just breeds this okay? And so, what do we do with that? What happens with that? So we were working with a school, and the superintendent made this great point. They were dealing with an issue. I'm not going to get into it right now. But he said, we're educators 100% of the time. 100% of the time. We don't become executioners when discipline is involved, which I thought was a really, really powerful statement. We're going to probably talk about that a little bit more. So in order to shift from this individual guilt and this, just kind of pushing people away to having a more communitarian or kind of bringing people together, keeping them in, we have to have a change to having what I like to borrow in a phrase, habitual stance. We have to have a habitual stance of communitarianism where we have a shared sense of responsibility. It is the relationships and the bonds that changes behavior. We change our behavior based upon the connections that we form with one another, not a deeper understanding of the rule that we violated, okay? So, I want to hit my slides here. So it's all about the relationship. We're doing stuff around the world. It's really, really exciting. So let's take a look at it. So it's about relationships. It's about these connections and these bonds. I get asked all the time, Steve, restorative practices, what type of model is it? Is it discipline? Is it, community building, all of those types of things? Well, it certainly incorporates a lot of these things, but the bottom line is restorative practices is a leadership model. The issues we're talking about here today, how we're going to respond to these issues, all boils down to what we as adults in the building, how we handle things. It's about us. It's about the adults in the building. It's about the staff. And so we would say, and we do say, if you're going to be restorative, if you're going to take a look at how we exercise these bonds to impact this behavior, we'd say our fundamental hypothesis of restorative practices is that human beings are happier, more cooperative and productive, and more likely to make positive changes in their behavior when those in positions of authority do things with them rather than to them or for them. All right? And one of the things you're going to find out here today as we go through this brief presentation, I'm not going to say anything that's brand new. I don't have a single thing which is earth-shatteringly new by any stretch of the imagination. What we do feel has been our strength is that we have taken some behaviors which are really kind of difficult to define. They're rather vague or nebulous, and we've really codified them, and the benefit of that is that we can teach these skills to one another and hold one another accountable for it. So how do we exercise our authority in a way that engages people and gives them a voice and gives them to say? That's our fundamental hypothesis. We're going to get those outcomes when we exercise our authority in what we call a with way. Well, the explicit aim of restorative practices in school communities is to develop community and to manage conflict and tensions by repairing harm and restoring relationships, okay? So if it's the bond that changes behavior, how many of us have been dealing with a difficult student or a difficult parent or something like that, right? And then that right person walks into the room. Okay. That right person walks into the room. Maybe that person's friend, maybe the right adult figure in their life, maybe the boyfriend, maybe the girlfriend, and comes in and just simply says, yo, knock it off, they're trying to help you. And then all of a sudden everything changes. We've all experienced it, okay? While we're pounding them over the head with how horrible and egregious what you have done, it violates these rules, what they really care about is being a part of something and being connected. So we have to intentionally, on purpose all the time is the phrase we like to use. On purpose all the time, create community. Okay, I know I just said a big thing there. I'm going to let that sit for right now. But create these bonds, create these connections. And so that when conflict and tensions arise, and by the way, we get into this when we do our professional development, conflict and tension is actually a good thing, right? It's actually necessary. It actually means that people are thinking, they have opinions, they have values, they have passion, okay? It's when they collide that the conflict and tension becomes an issue, okay? But we don't want the absence of it. In fact, Niels Christie in 1977, he's a Norwegian sociologist who wrote an article called Conflict is Property. And what he says is if we actually rob a community of its conflict, you will kill it. So it's not the matter of not having conflict, it's how you navigate that. And we say, so create these bonds. When the problem happens, it's not a crime against the policy manual. It's a crime against our connections. It's a crime against our relationships. And so we need to repair that harm, and we need to restore those relationships. We're talking about coming up with alternatives to exclusionary discipline. And really the bottom line is, in all of that, is that it's relationships that are going to change behavior. And so briefly, today we're going to be talking about how educators, administrators, those in authority with youth, exercise their authority in such a way that creates a culture and a climate that builds a connection, a shared sense of responsibility, a shared sense of accountability to help decrease problematic behaviors from happening in the first place, but then also when they do, to draw upon the social capital that's been built up to help come up with real outcomes and solutions that address the true needs of everybody that's been involved. The bottom line is teaching and learning, and so creating a classroom culture where it's not an individual type of guilt or blame, but it's a shared responsibility for everybody's learning is ultimately what we're looking for in the use of restorative practices.
One of the great ways that I've seen to improve discipline at Maya Angelou Public Charter School is by really focusing on engaging families and having buy-in from parents and guardians. And once we do that, the students typically turn around. These are students who have been disengaged and disenfranchised. And once we involve the home front, typically they turn around and want to be in school.
Is that a difficult thing to accomplish?
It definitely is. Many of our families come from lower socioeconomic status, and education isn't seen as something that they're interested in. So once we can get them to really buy in and see that it's important, we typically get the students involved as well.
What are the keys to getting the family involved?
Letting them know that this is a new opportunity, and any of the previous experiences that they may have had at other school systems really doesn't matter. We're really just focused on tailoring our approach to work with every family. So really tailoring and intervening one-on-one with all families.
Ways in which we utilize to improve behavioral management and positive PBI systems, which we call RISE, at the Maya Angelou schools, is to allow scholars to know that we set them up for success utilizing our school norms, which, again, is called RISE. So that stands for respect and responsibility, integrity, safety, and self-determination and empathy. And when our scholars are literally performing in the way in which we desire, they're given a praise value star, which identifies the RISE system that we like to incorporate in our environment.
What kind of results have you seen?
Tremendous results. Our students love being recognized, and who doesn't? And that's what we're all about. We're about recognizing scholars when they are doing well, so they can utilize these tools to be a part of what and how they demonstrate themselves, not only at school, but out in their community and society at large.
Are you encouraged about the potential that this offers?
I'm highly encouraged by it, and the reason why is because I am also a Maya Angelou alumni. I graduated from the school, and now I work there as a behavior management specialist.
Build relationships. Human beings change their behavior based upon the bonds that they form with one another. So if we're proactive about creating connections, about creating relationships, about creating bonds. I was going to say friendship, but I don't know, it's not necessarily everybody has to be friends, but they have to have a mutual respect for one another. You proactively build that up front, it's going to greatly reduce the problems in the future. And when they do come up, which is going to happen because that's natural, when they do come up, now we've got some connections, and it's not about what rule was violated, but what harm we've done to our relationship. That's the way that you impact discipline.
The message here today is very simple and direct. It is critical for charter schools to have strategic plans, and those strategic plans are created by the board of directors and school staff working as partners. The title of the session, the board role in strategic planning. I probably don't have to tell you, because you've decided to be in this workshop, that this is a real important topic for charter schools, and specifically for those of you that serve as board leaders. strategic planning is really at the very heart of what it means to be an effective board member and collectively board of directors. You can't be a great board without engaging in strategic planning and strategic thinking. So the link is just deep and it's critical. The role of a board member of a charter school, simply put, is to govern, to make higher level decisions that guide the charter school. And an important element of that governance activity is engagement in strategic thinking and strategic planning.
What kind of success have board members had throughout the country when it comes to running charter schools?
The charter schools that are successful can owe that success to a number of things: dedicated staff and board members who understand their roles and are truly committed to the mission of the charter school and the importance of strategic planning to get the school to where the leaders want it to be.
What's your best advice for school board members?
The best advice for school board members is, even before you get onto the board, know what you're getting into. You're going to be a member of the governing board of the charter school, and with that comes an incredible responsibility to be strategic in your thinking, responsive to the needs of the children and the families that the school is presuming to serve.
Hi, my name is LaShawn Allen. I'm a 7th grade life science teacher at Jack A. Skirball Middle School. And so far, being a teacher specifically in a charter environment, it's the impact that we have on our students daily that has mostly impacted my life and what I've learned so far.
What's the key to making a positive impact on a student?
I think it's involved in the mission and vision and building the culture of the school. So really involving your students, knowing your students, and building that sense of community on your campus.
What's your suggestion and recommendation to other teachers in other schools?
Find a network, build upon it, put the students first, always, and you'll definitely succeed.
We spent the last 2 years studying 4 large urban districts across the country. We wanted to understand the issue of teacher retention, but we wanted to understand that problem through the lens of effectiveness. So we wanted to understand how effective teachers were retained and whether that was different than less effective teachers.
And what did the study show?
What we found was that across the 4 districts we studied, that they were holding on to their best and worst teachers at very similar rates.
Give us an example.
So for example, in New York City, they retain 94% of their teachers overall, and that percentage is the same for the top 20% of teachers and the bottom 20% of teachers. And that's despite the fact that when a top teacher leaves the classroom, it can take up to 11 teachers to find someone of comparable quality. And whereas when a low-performing teacher leaves the classroom, 3 out of 4 times the replacement teacher is likely to be of better quality.
What was the conclusion to the report in terms of advice for school systems to retain good teachers?
So our advice was that that districts and schools really need to focus on smart retention. They need to think about making sure they don't lose any or as few of their top performing teachers as is possible. And when it comes to low performing teachers, there needs to be really high standards. So those teachers either need to be helped to improve, but if they don't, then those teachers leaving can actually lead to better outcomes for kids.
I think the bottom line is that marketing isn't just this slick marketing tool that corporations use in order to make people buy more of what they, don't want or need. I think it is a way to create deep connections with the people that you work with. So whether it's parents or working inside of, districts or inside of communities, I think charter schools have a very big marketing task in terms of explaining what they are and developing deeper connections with the communities that they work with. And marketing is a tool to get there.
And what's your recommendation to charter schools to do that?
1, know your brand, know who you are and who you're not, and don't be afraid to not be everything to everyone, and then know who you're really talking to and communicating with each piece. If it's something geared towards donors, talk to donors. If it's something geared towards parents, streamline your message and speak straight to them. Don't try to be everything to everyone. Be clear, concise, short, and to the point.
Another issue that schools face is funding. What's your recommendation there?
relationships. And, I don't have to say too much about what that means here in New Orleans, but, it's all about making sure that someone's expecting your grant proposal when it comes through the door, and that you have a level relationship with a funder so that you can really check in and find out why you haven't been funding or how you can increase your funding opportunities down the line. So we're not really going to talk too much today about grant writing. There's a lot of people that can write fabulous proposals. We're going to talk about that relationship piece and how we can really, really, really maximize it to get more funding to our schools.
Are you encouraged by the potential that charter schools offer?
Absolutely. I think choice is an essential part of every educational process. I think having parents more involved in schools, having communities develop curriculums that really speak to what children need and what communities want in order to grow and develop, it's essential. And I think charters provide an opportunity for us to get that right.
There is great power in giving parents and teachers and school leaders choices in their education environments, whether that's a parent choosing what's best for their student or it's a teacher choosing what school they would like to be a part of.
If people have questions or like more information, what should they do?
They can go to our website, www.lacharterschools.org.